Hi, good afternoon. My name is Adam Feinberg, and you are listening to Harlem Stories. We are a podcast that specializes in Upper Manhattan. Today, we're going to be talking about title insurance with our guest, Berto, and I'm going to introduce him, or I'll have him introduce himself, and then we'll hop right into the exciting world of title insurance. And while it doesn't exactly sound exciting, at the same time, I'm sure you can find a lot of great examples within your work that kind of makes it exciting.
Absolutely. I'll try my best.
All right, Berto.
Adam, thank you again for having me. My name is Berto. I'm the Executive Managing Director of Langdon Title Services. And I've been in real estate for about 13 years now, 2 years as a broker, 4 years running a mortgage company, a year in credit repair, many years in real estate investing, and I've been in title insurance for the past 7 years and currently am a landlord, investor, Airbnb superhost, etc. And yes, title insurance plays a big role in a lot of this, and we'll get to that.
All right. So, let's get to it. What is title insurance and why is it so important?
Right. Well, title insurance is a policy that protects the owner against any losses arising through title. And I don't know, we feel it's important. It's almost required. It's not required in New York because it's such a small percentage, right? Let's say on $1 million home, you're paying maybe $3,000 to protect you and your heirs for as long as you own the property. So as long as title does not change hands and you can pass that policy along to your children and not have to pay again. You'll continue to be protected. Of course, if you sell the property, no longer. If you refinance, the bank will require you get a portion of title insurance again. And if you take people off and put people back on title, that might affect it as well. So you have to give those disclaimers.
So if you're financing, pretty much the bank will force you to have title insurance?
100% will require you to have title insurance. There's two parts of title insurance. There's an owner's policy and a lender's policy. The owner's policy is paid for by the buyer and it will protect the buyer. And the lender's policy is also paid for by the buyer, but it will protect the lender. The lender's policy is required. The owner's policy, as I mentioned, is not. But I mean, out of, let's say we do 1,000 transactions a year, maybe one person will forego title insurance. And an attorney in New York will literally make you sign a waiver that is, forgiving them of any fault. Like they warned you, they told you it was important, they told you these were all the benefits, and you decided not to, they'll make you sign a waiver typically. So very important to do so.
They don't want to mess around with it.
They don't want the liability.
Right.
Of course.
Awesome. So, in terms of those, how often do we see problems with title where, it's significant or even for that matter, insignificant? And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Most of the times, insignificant, right? Similar to health insurance, right? Or car insurance, we pay for it all the time and we rarely take it, use it, hopefully, right? No one wants to be in a car accident or have health issues. But when things do arise, you're happy it's there. Typically, all of these problems will be solved prior to closing. So we rarely have any claims. But just to give you a few examples that I've recently just had. So just to give you some background on the whole thing. So we do a 40-year search in New York. Mm-hmm. We search 40 years back to make sure there is a consecutive chain of title, to make sure that every party that owned the property was legally allowed to sell the property for 40 years back. And we also do municipal searches, meaning that we check the fire department, the water, the sewage. We check violations. We check permits, the certificate of occupancy, and many other things. A lot of those things we provide for informational purposes only, and we provide them to the attorney so that they can decide what they'd like to do with these issues along with the buyer and seller. But some of them affect us, of course. If there's an open water bill, that can put a lien against the property before the mortgage, right? Or taxes, right? If there's open taxes, same thing. That can put a lien on the property before the mortgage, and the lender will not close that way because obviously the mortgage is the most protected thing that's collateral. The home is against for the bank, of course.
Of course.
But to give you an example, recently I was working with a good broker, a friend of mine. She just posted a nice story thanking me about it, which was great. There were a few issues, and some of them were not issues, and some of them were. The ones that were not issues, the attorneys were throwing up their hands saying, this is a huge problem. We can't close. Title is saying that there's open violations and they won't let us close. And there's an encroachment on the survey and title won't let us close. And we had to very politely tell this attorney, like, hey, you're just throwing us under the bus. And I told my broker friend this, and we replied in an email with everyone on it, like, hey, these are not our problems. Like, we provide this for informational purposes only. We can close with either of these issues. So fire violations are for informational purposes only. Like I said, they will not stop us from closing. The encroachment was interesting. There was a prior survey which showed this is the lot that the owner owns. Mm-hmm. And the new survey showed about a 10-inch encroachment on the property. And he's blaming title. First of all, a survey is something that we order as a courtesy, right? We have a bunch of surveyor contacts. We get a request to order a survey. We reach out to a few of them. They give us quotes. We present them. You choose, right? We provide it as a courtesy. It is not, they don't belong to our company. They don't work for us. It's just a service, right? So we get the survey, and obviously we get blamed for all survey issues.
Of course.
Of course. And he's saying that it's a big problem. My broker friend was able to call me. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Friday. And I was able to have my back office answer me within 5 minutes. The owner of my company, Stephen Saller, called me within 5 minutes of getting the email. Thank you, Stephen, by the way. And I was able to reply to the broker and have her and her buyers rest easy throughout the weekend. So service is a very important thing in my industry. And what Stephen had mentioned to me is that in New York City, when there is an encroachment of less than 12 inches, it is de minimis. Meaning that if I encroached on your property, Adam, and you go to sue me after closing, and let's say you go to court, but it's only a 10-inch encroachment, it will be dismissed.
Is that pretty common? I see a lot of times I'll go in and I'll see, this property is 16 feet, but it's only, allotted 15.6 or something like that. And you'll see a little bit of an encroachment. Yeah. So is that something that we commonly, are dealing with? Yeah,
you'll see it here or there because, if you don't get a survey with stakes and you're building a fence, let's say, if I had built my fence in my brownstone all the way to my neighbor's fence, I would have encroached a few inches. But we didn't need the extra space. We would have had to dig up all those bushes and stuff. So we built up to our line. So it depends on the actual survey that you get. Our survey came out and put actual stakes in the actual points, and we built to that spot.
Gotcha. And the survey is more typically done for townhouses or houses rather than condos.
Yeah, of course, condo, you don't need it.
Right.
Not much to do there service-wise, survey-wise. You will need an appraisal, of course, because the bank will require that. People often confuse them or think they're similar. They're two completely different companies and two completely different services. So surveys are for commercial properties, lots of land, single-family homes, multifamily homes, and brownstones, of course. It's good to have. You might not always need it, but of course, we recently spoke about renovations, and it's good to have a survey for that as well.
Right. Yeah. And in terms of, title insurance, we talked about obviously townhouses and condos. What about co-ops?
Co-ops, you are just buying shares in a corporation. Which is not a bad thing, right? As long as you can buy it, own it, earn equity, and sell it and make money, it's still great. But it's considered not real property.
Right.
Do not let that deter any of your buyers because it's still, you're owning something, that you can sell, which is all that matters. I mean, if people can buy an NFT, they can buy a co-op, right? NFTs, you're literally buying nothing. At least a co-op, you're buying something you can live in.
Or at least you hope you're buying something. Hopefully you get approved. And
that's a whole process. So title insurance is only on real properties, which is anything except a co-op.
Now, I've heard of, what is it, Eagle 9 or product, something like that. Can you talk a little bit more about
there is title insurance technically for co-ops. An Eagle 9 is a specific product from First American. Other companies have things like Fidelity has one. I think Chicago might have one, and it's just to provide you with more protection. It usually happens when things are a little messy in the co-op. Maybe people have passed away. There's an estate sale, and you might not know. all the information and you want to have that extra coverage, we probably maybe do a handful of them a year.
Yeah, I've done a couple, with those types of products, and one was an estate, sale. The other one, apparently, as soon as they got into contract, it was a divorce situation, and apparently the ex-husband stopped paying child support and all sorts of other bills. So as soon as they got into contract, there was apparently over 40 liens on the property by the time that we had tried to close, and somehow or another we pulled it off, and we did wind up getting it closed. But it did involve one of those types of products, for title.
That's a good example to have that.
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes I'm sure you get like some crazy situations like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's been things come up all the time. You'd be surprised. I remember a story. This wasn't us, but being in the industry, you get calls from other people, and you're like, oh my God, this crazy thing happened. Someone who had already passed away was selling a property to someone. Because people were forging their signatures and documents. It was crazy. And there was another story where it was in Connecticut. Someone did not get title insurance, and the land apparently belonged to Native Americans, and they took the land back, and the person lost their property.
Wow.
So you hear all kinds of weird stuff, and who knows, it's telephone. Maybe it wasn't that bad.
Right.
But they sound fun. They're fun to talk about. Yeah.
So can you talk about some of the challenges that you've had, dealing with title, some of those more interesting, colorful stories? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Those two are always interesting. I remember there was a case where this lady owned a three-family in Brooklyn, and she moved to Miami and had her cousin staying on the property in one unit, renting out the other two, managing it overall. And she ends up getting a phone call like, hey, we're scheduling the closing for your property. And she's like, what closing? She had no idea. He had also, went through the whole process of selling the property and thought he could just show up and forge the signatures and call it a day. But it's obviously you have to show IDs, and it's not that easy. So that must have been fun for her. But typically what we get, there's violations on a property. As I mentioned before, we don't care about them. Informational purposes only. The attorneys will have to discuss monetary agreements on
the
how to
attorneys
take care of them.
And the banks might care, but
the bank will definitely care. Yeah. Open permits. Most banks will care. Some banks can lend with open permits. They don't care about the municipal searches, which is what encompasses that open permit search. And I've even seen some banks that are able to lend on completely non-habitable homes, but it'll be a purchase construction loan, and you have to have approved plans to make the property habitable, which obviously all the things that we find in title, not ownership is extremely important, but all of the other things won't matter, like open permits and violations, etc. Liens are super common, taxes, parking tickets you see all the time. If they find out you have a property and you stop getting that notice in the mail, it's because they put a lien on your property. So don't let that go forever. That'll get you. But it's also good to find liens. For example, when I bought a home in Brooklyn, it's an investment property, one of them, and I didn't care which property I chose. It was down to two. And when I did a lien search, I was able to find that there was a $900,000 mortgage on this property. So I did a purchase EMA, as we mentioned before, consolidation, extension, modification agreement. And all that does, it's a process that you won't have to deal with. The banks will deal with it. Attorneys will deal with it. It saved me, I think it was about $7,500 in mortgage tax. Being that it was an investment and numbers mattered, I chose that property. And that's our two-family in Bushwick.
Gotcha. And we started talking about, some things in terms of cost and, the purchase process.
Yeah.
Mortgage or title insurance, it's a fixed cost. Am I correct on that?
Yes. Every person in New York City, every title company in New York City will be the same. Whether you go to an underwriter or an agent, we are an agent. We're a top 20 agent in New York City, and our underwriters are names that I'm sure seen on a side of a building somewhere, Fidelity, First American, Chicago, Stewart, Old Republic, and many others. But at the end of the day, no matter whether you're an agent or underwriter, we'll all be the same price. It's a percentage of the purchase price in loan amount. So whether you use us, by far one of the most reputable companies in the city, or you could throw, a dart into a phone book. For anyone that's over 30, phone books are a thing back in the day. You could pick any company. We're all going to be the same price. So that's agnostic, right? What's important is having someone that you know, someone that you trust, someone that you know is going to answer. And of course, any one of your buyers or yourself can reach out to me anytime. They can ask me questions. I'm happy to talk to consumers any day about the whole process. I can give them some estimated closing costs. We say estimated because legally we have to, but it's exact.
Gotcha.
Unless the purchase price or loan amount changes, or unless you add a power of attorney, or unless the county changes, right? Then those numbers are exact. We will give you a great idea of what you're going to pay for closing costs, which is important because $1 million home with 80% down in New York City is $40,000.
Right.
And you want to know that going into the whole process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges that, I've certainly had, and I'm sure many other agents have, is when to potentially involve you in the process.
Right.
Because, once we actually have an accepted offer, there's all sorts of things going on.
Yes.
So, can you talk a little bit about that and how you come into the process and, how can it be a little easier maybe?
Of course. Typically, title insurance gets ordered once your contract is signed on both sides. That's 90% of the time when the attorney will order, your buyer's attorney will order title. He gets that signed contract and he'll send the copy to the title company to order title. That's what they use to order. However, I personally love to get involved much earlier because that means I'll hopefully get the business, and I'm 100% commission just like you are. This is how I make a living. So the earlier in the process, the better. I mean, you can reach out to me and we would be happy to do these complimentary searches for your buyers anytime. I can check on open permits. I can check on violations. I can check on liens. I can let you know who the last owner of record is. If it's, on any property, I can let you know if something might potentially be built across the street and block your view in the future. All of these things we'll do as a courtesy in order, and of course, we would just love to earn your business. And the best time to do that is once you have an accepted offer, you CC me in an email with your attorney and say, hey, this is Berto of Langdon Title. We'd like to use him for title insurance on this deal. So once the offer is accepted, it's the best time. And
Gotcha.
Attorneys order title because it's customary. There's no law, there's no rule, there's no regulation that says attorneys order title. It's something that has just become customary over the years. But the vast majority of my clients are real estate agents, are brokers who refer the attorney, and they're asking the attorney nicely, hey, once again, CC'd is Berto, I'm sending you this deal. We'd like to use my guy. But ultimately, the only person that's legally allowed to choose is the buyer. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and a lot of times the buyers, have no idea. So, so it's an educational process and understanding like the value that you provide and and that information. One thing that I know that I've seen in the headlines before. I haven't seen it much in the last few years. Maybe they've changed processes and improved. But I remember a number of years back seeing these headlines where there were these townhouses in Harlem owned by elderly owners, and they're, I guess the properties were through the city were basically being stolen from them. And I'm like, obviously they had to go through some sort of legal process through Department of Finance and getting, some of these things legally changed. They might not have had, any kind of a mortgage on it because they bought these things, potentially even generation or two ago. So can you talk a little bit about like how title insurance can kind of, impact in those kind of scenarios, whether it's on eventual resale or helping those owners? And
I don't know that story.
Okay.
But I would imagine, let's say they paid it off years ago and there was no mortgage, so the bank's not foreclosing.
Right.
But you still owe taxes. And these poor elderly people have probably been getting assessed, and the values of everything is rising in New York, especially over the past 50 years. So maybe they probably didn't pay their taxes. And, the city was probably slapping liens on their property. And I don't know how they took them back, though.
It was some sort of, it was basically somebody stole the properties out from under them.
Jesus.
And I know that they caught a couple of those situations, but I think a couple of them were still unresolved as of like a year or two ago.
Yeah, I mean, if they have title insurance, then those owners could have put in a claim. And that title insurance company would have to defend them legally in court. And even if the title company, for some reason, had gone out of business because it was an agent, then all of the policies are written on an underwriter's piece of paper. So maybe XYZ title company went out of business, but they wrote it on First American. First American is very much still around, and they will honor that policy. So they would have been protected.
Gotcha. Yeah, scary stuff to hear about some of those things, and I know that the DA's office was involved in these things. So, but obviously, it's something that needed to be taken care of. But apparently, through Department of Finance, the processes there were weak, and they found ways to transfer the property illegally.
God. That's crazy.
And steal the property out from under them. So, apparently there's now some sort of additional protections through the Department of Finance. But I don't know enough of that story to know all the details.
You find the story, send me the link, and I'll let you know. I'll dig into it some more.
Gotcha.
And we'll post like a comment and in the follow-up or something,
Yeah, absolutely. Because, obviously, these are things that actually have happened in Harlem.
Yeah.
So, we know that people are going to be interested in that.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And kind of like moving away from like that kind of crazy scenario to more of like an everyday, scenario that we encounter and more specifically in the properties in Harlem, you might actually see a little bit of it in Brooklyn. SROs. These things are a little bit more complicated. From a title perspective, does that kind of give you any kind of complications, or is there anything a little different on your end of the equation?
Yeah, I wish I had something more exciting for you, but once again, certificate of occupancy, the C of O is something that we provide for informational purposes only. Once again, we get blamed for a lot of these things because people are like, I don't know what the title company's doing. They're saying it's a 2-family when it's a 3-family, or, an SRO comes up and we're just giving this to the attorney. All we're doing is pulling these records and providing them, and they can decide what to do with it. So that's that ends easier for us,
And you mentioned like some of the costs, for title insurance are related to the bank loan, but with SROs, a lot of banks won't lend.
Yes.
So obviously is a title insurance on an SRO cheaper, as a result?
Yeah, because there'll be no lender's policy.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's not an exact percentage, but you can sort of do the math. Just think of it. I'm going to, I guess, round up to be safe, but say it's about $3,500 per million for the purchase price, the owner's policy, I guess, and about $2,500 per million for the loan. It's probably less for the loan, but at least I'd rather round up and overstate it than understate it. And
that makes sense. Yeah.
So if you're getting, let's say, a $2 million home with a $1 million property, that'd be $7,000 for the owner's policy and $2,500 for the lender's policy. Right, so you're looking at $9,500, but it's probably less than that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I did mention, like before, you can email me anytime with the address, the purchase price, and the loan amount, and I'll get you those closing costs in a couple hours.
Gotcha. I think you've answered all the questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we, wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I think one thing that I'd love to mention, of course, is that I'm happy to be a resource for anyone. I've been in the real estate industry for a long time, and I'm happy to answer questions. Of course, you got the real estate part, but the title insurance part, or any renovation process, construction process, even some mortgage or credit repair stuff, I'm very well versed in. And I have brokers, investors, developers, and direct buyers reaching out to me every day for estimated closing cost, what's being built across the street, what is the air rights on the property, I saw this thing online. I saw this thing on Property Shark. I saw this thing on DOB. What does that mean for me? What does that mean for my purchase? How's it going to affect me when I sell the property? We will happily look into all of this anytime. As I mentioned before, it is a courtesy. We do it as a service. We just want an opportunity to earn your business. And like I mentioned before, we're all the same price, right? So you might as well use someone that is providing value, which is hopefully me. We're a top 20 title insurance company in the city. I've been a top producer at every firm I've been a part of in terms of, as a sales rep, because we do a good job. And we have 50 people in our back office, 6 attorneys in our back office. It's one of the most robustly staffed title companies in the city, and we're great at what we do. So we hope to see you. We hope to see you soon.
Awesome. And on that note, I'll have your contact information in the notes. When we release the episode, for any brokers listening to this, remember, as soon as you have an accepted offer, it's good to, bring in your title person. And, Berto's, been really great to me and those in my office that I've worked with. So really positive experience. And,
Nice.
So I could say firsthand, with glowing recommendations and obviously, but yeah, the time to bring him in is as soon as you have an accepted offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Berto. And this is a wrap, another episode of Harlem Stories.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy listening.